A person has three enemies: the world, consisting of people who often use freedom for evil; the devil, who sometimes comes with faith; and one's own flesh, which, out of boredom and excessive freedom, tends to cause harm and damage to oneself or others. Only the person has the choice to let enemies get close or to keep them under special control. Help this channel grow. Like the video, try the new hype feature, leave a comment, and subscribe for more stories. This helps us a lot. Thank you. Early in the morning on June 20th, 1996, at 2 a.m., an ambulance crew was driving down the exit from Interstate 476. Local residents called this road the Blue Route. The exit led to Marple, a small town in Delaware County, Pennsylvania. As they turned, something caught their attention. A lone blue Honda Civic with the driver's door wide open stood on the roadside. It was a bit strange, so the medics stopped to check if the driver needed help. When they approached the scene, the situation started to look even stranger. The car's engine was still running, the radio was blaring, the headlights and interior lights were on, but the driver was nowhere to be found. When the medics cautiously approached the car, they immediately realized something was wrong, and when they saw a pool of blood on the ground in front of the car, they grabbed the radio and reported the incident to the police. A few minutes later, police cars and investigators arrived at the scene, and their flashlights cut through the darkness as they tried to figure out what had happened. It was difficult to work, but the detectives quickly found a possible weapon: a stone with blood splatters and a crowbar lying next to a bloody trail leading from the car. Then the officers noticed even more crimson stains smeared on the guardrail to the right of the highway. Given that the blood was near the front of the car, the most likely scenario was a hit and run. Perhaps the driver hit someone and then, in a panic, decided to get rid of the victim and flee. The scarlet trail on the ground indicated that someone had been dragged there. However, there were no damages on the front of the Honda, so the accident version immediately seemed implausible. In the car's interior, police found several items. On the passenger seat lay a cap, backpack, and a jacket. On the floor, a steering wheel lock. On the back seat, the detectives found a folder of papers. During further inspection of the scene near this abandoned Honda, tire tracks from another car were noticed on the ground. Rain was starting, so the investigators had to act quickly. They tried to photograph as many potential pieces of evidence as possible before the water washed away some clues. The experts also took the opportunity to make plaster casts of the tire tracks to preserve them for further detailed analysis. While the detectives checked the license plate to find out who the car was registered to, a full-scale search was organized. Police patrolled the area, and volunteers combed through the bushes and marshy terrain near the exit. The weather worsened. Volunteers walked side by side, in some places knee-deep in water, just to find any leads that could lead to the missing driver's location. Ultimately, the search led to a pair of white sneakers and underwear found about 800 meters from where the car was discovered. No one knew if these items had any connection to the abandoned car, especially since the items were completely dry, not soiled with mud or dust, even though it had rained outside. In any case, they were bagged and sent to the forensic lab. By that time, the investigators had already established the name of the blue Honda Civic's owner. It turned out to be a 44-year-old woman named Gail Willard, who lived in a bungalow just 15 minutes' drive from the highway. Officers tried to contact her but got no response, so they assumed that this woman was behind the wheel that night. The authorities immediately issued an alert for Gail Willard, with her description and photo. Usually, such alerts are passed between police departments and law enforcement dispatchers. But the authorities didn't know that Gail worked as a nurse in the emergency department, and many of her friends and colleagues kept in touch with dispatchers to track accidents and be ready to receive seriously ill patients. When Gail's name came over the radio that morning, her colleagues were shocked. They knew that a week ago, the woman had gone to her beach house in New Jersey, located about an hour-and-a-half drive away. One of the employees called Gail and told her that her car had been found abandoned on the side of the Blue Route. This news alarmed Willard, because she had left the Honda with her 22-year-old daughter, Amy. The girl was supposed to come to her mom at the beach house that day. Without wasting time, Gail contacted the police and explained the situation. She gave a full description of her daughter: height 170 centimeters, weight 55 kilograms, dark chestnut hair, blue eyes, tanned skin with freckles. Amy had an athletic build, and she had a small tattoo on her ankle in the form of the Nike logo. Then Gail called Amy's father, Paul, who was a police sergeant in a neighboring police department, and together they started contacting their daughter's friends, trying to find out where she had disappeared to. Mother couldn't calmly enjoy her vacation when her child was in trouble, so she hurried back to Pennsylvania. Gail spent the rest of the day at the spot where the Honda was found. She carefully inspected the car, hoping to find some clue that the police hadn't noticed. The woman immediately spotted an obvious scratch on the car's rear bumper and explained to the detectives that it hadn't been there before. Therefore, someone had hit the car from behind. Gail provided the police with information about the plans for that very night. It turned out that the girl had come to town for summer vacation. She was studying at George Mason University in Virginia and had achieved outstanding athletic success there. Usually, the daughter spent evenings at home with her family, but on June 19, 1996, Amy arranged to meet with former classmates at Smokey Joe's bar, which was about 30 minutes' drive from their home. The girl decided to go only because the lacrosse game was canceled due to rain. Smokey Joe's bar was a favorite hangout spot for college students year-round, but in the summer, everything changed. On weekdays, the atmosphere of the place was quiet and cozy. You could sit and chat peacefully with former classmates. The detectives found out the names and phone numbers of all Amy's friends she was with that evening, and also talked to the staff of the establishment. Everything was as usual: fun, a couple of cocktails, and sharing impressions about college studies. The next day, Amy needed to prepare for an economics class, so she left the bar earlier than her former classmates. The news of the student's disappearance quickly spread throughout the town and surrounding areas. The broadcast of the investigation in the mass media brought a flood of tips from people wanting to provide whatever help they could in searching for the girl who disappeared on the highway. Amy Eileen Willard was born on June 8, 1974, in Chester, Pennsylvania. She was the third child in the family, the youngest. Amy's father, Paul, served in the local police station. He was a serious man who believed in the power of discipline. From early childhood, he hammered one lesson into his children's heads: be attentive and careful. Learn to defend yourself. For Paul, these were not just words. Due to his job, he knew how cruel the world around could be. Amy's mother, Gail, worked as a nurse in the emergency department and saw how fragile human life is. Looking at the relatives of patients praying for the recovery of their loved ones, her greatest fear was to be in their place. From the outside, the Willards seemed like a typical friendly family, but behind closed doors, the relationships were complicated. After the parents' divorce, Amy moved to live in a small bungalow with her mom. Gail combined her maternal duties with a tight work schedule in the emergency department. Faith in God was the foundation of the entire family's life, and later it was woven directly into Amy's daily life. Gail's sister was a nun, and the girl went to study behind the iron gates of a private Catholic school for girls where her aunt taught. Sports were an integral part of the education. Every year, the academy produced champions in basketball, soccer, and lacrosse, and Amy quickly mastered all three games. The girl was predicted a brilliant future in sports and considered her a rising star. Enrolling at George Mason University in Virginia, where Willard studied physical education to become a high school coach, she fully lived up to her title as a local sports legend. In every match she won, setting records for points that lasted for years. Amy was one of the 25 best female players in the country, and her goal was to achieve even greater success. In her college years, the girl not only set records in sports, but also managed to build a personal life. She started dating a guy named Al, and lately they were inseparable. Amy even introduced Al to her friends and family, and everyone around saw how deeply the young people were in love with each other. No one could imagine that Amy's triumph, her victories in championships, and her unstoppable enthusiasm overshadowed cancer. The school year ended, and Amy Willard returned home to immerse herself in the familiar atmosphere of her childhood. But it wasn't a time for rest, because the student wasn't going to slow down and enrolled in courses at Delaware County Community College to keep her academic edge even in the summer. She combined additional studies with her athletic commitments, and it wasn't easy. However, she succeeded. In addition to sports competitions and studies, the girl spent a lot of time looking for work, trying to fit as many things as possible into her summer vacation before returning to her final year at university. Despite all her commitments, she managed to free up time for her friends, ending up at Smokey Joe's bar on Wednesday evening, June 19th. But now she was missing, and barely glancing at the items, the sneakers and underwear, Gail immediately realized it belonged to her daughter. This was a bad sign. The police department appealed to the public, asking for any information about Amy, and a 23-year-old man named Andrew Kopak responded to the call. Andrew said that around 1 a.m. he was driving his Ford on the Blue Route and saw an abandoned car on the roadside. The police were immediately interested in why the man hadn't called 911. They also wanted to understand what brought him to that place at such a late hour, considering he worked until midnight at a nearby bar not far from Smokey Joe's. At least that's what he said. The detectives studied information about Andrew Kopak and learned that the young man lived in a prestigious area and had a reputation as a spoiled guy from a wealthy family who loved getting into trouble, mostly related to traffic violations. His father was a wealthy stockbroker. Of course, this didn't mean that Kopak had any connection to Amy's abduction. The investigators documented Andrew's tip and continued the search. Less than a day after Amy's disappearance, several children were playing hide and seek on a vacant lot when they stumbled upon a horrifying discovery. One boy saw something on the ground, not far from the trees, where the bushes approached the rocky slope of the railroad tracks. The child came closer and saw a naked female body lying face down in a fetal position. 2 plastic bags were placed over the victim's head. The frightened children ran for help from adults, and soon officers from the Philadelphia Police Department arrived at the scene. They immediately concluded that the girl's death was violent. The deceased was identified by the small Nike logo tattoo on her ankle. In this horrific way, parents had to learn that their daughter would never return home. Amy's mom said that although this news broke her heart, now she felt relief, because the hardest part was not knowing where her child was. Even if finding the criminal wouldn't bring Amy back to life, parents could at least find out what happened to her. The autopsy showed that Amy's cause of death was head trauma from a blunt object. At least 3 blows were inflicted, which disfigured the student's face and fractured the skull in 2 places. The left eye socket, nose, and right temporal bone were broken. One of the blows caused a stroke. The blow was so forceful that due to severe blood loss, the body began to faint. Amy's heart chambers were found almost empty during the autopsy, drained of blood. There were also strange cross-shaped marks on the body. It was a thermal burn obtained in an unknown way. As a result of the brutal and rapid attack, the girl's body was injured in several places. Bruises on the thighs and defensive wounds on Amy's hands as she tried to fight off the attacker indicated that the student had been assaulted. The pathologist managed to collect samples of the perpetrator's semen, and this could serve as a good lead in the case. The most disgusting thing, to humiliate her completely, the perpetrator shoved a tree branch into Willard's genitals, which was later found inside. There was no blood at the vacant lot where Amy was found. Therefore, she was killed elsewhere, and then the body was simply disposed of. Most likely, the first attack occurred right on the roadside in front of the car because blood traces remained there. The girl was stunned and then taken away from the crime scene in another vehicle. After that, another attack was committed, and finally, the third place was where the children found the lifeless body. However, there was a fourth place where the closing items were left. Whether this was done accidentally or intentionally remained to be figured out by the investigators. The forensic lab determined that the blood found at the scene on the highway where the Honda was abandoned belonged to Amy Willard. From the tire prints, experts were able to determine the model of the car that the perpetrator presumably drove, since a similar tread was found on tires of a specific brand. By comparing all the facts, the detectives began to gradually clarify the picture of what happened. Leaving the bar, Amy got into her car and drove along the main route of Interstate 476 toward her mother's house. Exiting the road for some reason, she pulled over to the shoulder and got out of the car, or she was somehow pulled out of there. Then the girl was attacked, and she resisted, as her father had taught her self-defense techniques. Amy fought back against the criminal and tried to escape. Her blood dripped onto the asphalt and smeared on the guardrail as she tried to climb over it. But unfortunately, Willard didn't manage to get caught. She couldn't cope with the monster that attacked her with his rage and anger. The investigators couldn't understand why the girl stopped on the highway shoulder in the middle of the night. Her car was in perfect condition, full tank of gas, all tires inflated, all systems working. Amy's father, a police sergeant, taught her to be vigilant. The girl, remembering her father's instruction, would never stop on the road without a good reason. The detectives considered several versions. The attacker could have been someone the girl knew. Then she could have stopped to, for example, give him a ride. However, the scratch on the Honda's body suggested that the criminal intentionally rammed Amy's car, forcing her to stop as a result of an accident, and this version seemed more plausible. On June 23rd, Amy's loved ones saw her off on her final journey. About 4,000 people gathered for the memorial mass at the Catholic Church. The service time had to be extended so that all who wished could say goodbye to the deceased student and pay their respects. The line of mourners stretched hundreds of meters from the church entrance. Her university teammates built a canopy over Amy's coffin from their lacrosse steps to honor her achievements in lacrosse. Sports were Willard's life, and now, after death, other athletes stood guard of honor by her coffin. Everyone was crying. They had truly lost a future star, lost a friend, a family member, and it was very hard to realize that no one would ever hear Amy Willard's happy, ringing laughter again. Everywhere there were flowers, candles, and photographs, as well as Amy's sports attributes, lacrosse sticks, and her team's jerseys. Another memorial was created at the highway exit, where local residents left flowers, notes, and cans of Coca-Cola, the deceased girl's favorite drink. Without any other suspects at that moment, the detectives returned to Andrew Hoback. They found out that the guy dreamed of joining the fire department but wasn't accepted. Then Andrew decided to impersonate a police officer. His car had flashing lights installed, and in the interior he kept a police scanner. According to friends' stories, the young man sometimes put on a police uniform and stopped law-abiding drivers who didn't suspect a trick. After high school, Andrew worked in several local bars and restaurants, but at the time of the attack on Amy, the guy was unemployed, so his story about returning after a shift at the bar was made up. Andrew impersonating a police officer could have stopped Amy's car at night and taken advantage of her willingness to obey the law. Hoback was called to the station to give a statement. and he allowed the officers to search his car without a warrant. During the search in the glove compartment, the detectives found a powerful flashlight, and the car's interior was dirty, except for the rear part, which had apparently been recently cleaned. Sensing trouble, Andrew stopped the search and told the police he would hire a lawyer. However, the authorities were determined to see the case through. They obtained a warrant to search the house where Kobach lived and his car. The guy also had to provide a blood sample for a DNA test. Although Andrew denied any involvement in the attack on Amy and insisted on his innocence, the prosecutor was already ready to take the case to court. This story was in all the news. Previously, residents of the prestigious area had never encountered anything like this. Andrew's parents' house was searched. His car was towed to the forensic lab. But when the experts looked at the tires, they realized the wheels were different. Nothing was found in the car or at home that could help the investigation. By November, the case had reached a dead end again, because Andrew's DNA didn't match the DNA found on Amy's body. The perpetrator's DNA profile wasn't in the Pennsylvania State Database at all. All suspicions were officially lifted from Andrew Kobach, although he fit the role of suspect in the attack on the student like no one else. Local residents, learning that someone could impersonate police officers, were concerned and outraged. The Pennsylvania senator had to introduce new laws prohibiting unmarked police cars from stopping vehicles for traffic violations. While the investigation was ongoing, another alarming incident occurred on September 23rd. A woman contacted the police and reported an attack that happened on Interstate 476 on the same section of highway known as the Blue Route. She was driving when another vehicle forced her to pull over to the shoulder. A man in a ski mask and dark clothing opened her car door, pulled her from the driver's seat. The woman was injured. However, after studying the details, detectives concluded that this attack was in no way related to the murder of Amy Willard. But now the investigators stuck to the version that the student could indeed have been attacked by a police officer or someone impersonating a law enforcement officer. Reviewing old cases, they discovered another incident that occurred in 1994 when a woman was stopped by a man with a flashing blue light on the roof of his car. He demanded her driver's license, but when she pointed out the absence of a police uniform, the stranger got angry and punched her in the face, then tried to pull her out of the car. Fortunately, the woman was able to fight back, break free, and drive away, but the criminal never caught. Winter holidays passed. The new year 1997 arrived, and there were still no answers to the question, who took the life of the young promising athlete? The Willard case was shown in an episode of the show Unsolved Mysteries. That didn't yield any results. And shortly before the anniversary of Amy's death, a very strange coincidence occurred. In May 1997, 19-year-old student nurse Amy Willard was having fun at a party with friends at a nightclub. It was already past midnight when she said goodbye to everyone and headed home alone. On the way, the girl noticed bright headlights in the rearview mirror. An unfamiliar car was following, getting very close. When Patty tried to pull away by running first a yellow and then a red light, Pursuer did the same. When the girl changed lanes or accelerated, the unknown car repeated the maneuvers until it hit the rear of her body. Patty was shocked when the driver approached her car at a traffic light and started yelling through the open window that she had crashed into his car. He gestured for her to pull over to the shoulder and stop. The frightened girl continued driving and headed toward the police station. At that moment, the stranger cut her off and overtook her, so the student was able to see his license plate. It was Pennsylvania plates. Patty didn't stop, for she sensed the danger emanating from the strange man. Returning home, she told everything to her father. By a strange coincidence, the girl's father also served in the police. He reached the National Crime Information Center to check who the car with the license plate his daughter remembered was registered to. Further investigation showed that the car's owner was a 38-year-old black man named Arthur Bomar. Of course, this story immediately attracted the attention of the detectives handling Amy Willard's case. They checked this person's background and found out that he had a rich criminal history, including violence against women and intentional homicide. When Arthur was only 19 years old, he got into a fight over a parking spot with a man. Then, during the argument, Bomar pulled out a gun and shot his opponent. He was charged and sentenced to life imprisonment. However, Arthur was released from prison after just 11 years. For some inexplicable reason, the parole board thought it would be a good idea to release this monster into society. In 1990, he got out of prison and moved to Pennsylvania. Just a few months after his release, Bomar was back in prison after pulling a woman out of her own car and attacking her right on the street. He was arrested and was supposed to be sent back to prison in Nevada, but the woman he attacked died under circumstances unrelated to Arthur, so the case was dropped. The criminal was free again. The investigators tried to find Bomar, but he wasn't at home or at work, and no one knew where he was. Fortunately, the police didn't have to wait long, because just a couple of weeks later, on June 5, 1997, a woman called 911 and reported an intruder trying to break into her apartment. When the police arrived, they found a man who introduced himself as Peter Thomas, but fingerprints later confirmed that it was actually Arthur Bomar, who had given a different name. He was arrested on an outstanding warrant for violating parole conditions and criminal trespass. It turned out that Arthur was driving a stolen Honda. He had simply switched the license plate from his old Ford. The detectives found out that the Honda previously belonged to a 25-year-old young woman named Maria Buenas, who was missing. Her family reported her disappearance when Maria didn't show up for work. Her route passed along the same highway where Amy was driving when she was abducted. When the crime investigators conducted a thorough search of the stolen car, they immediately noticed damage on the rear bumper, and when they looked in the trunk, they found dried blood inside. The sample was immediately sent to the lab for analysis. Now Arthur became the main suspect in the murder of Amy and the disappearance of Maria Cabanas. The man denied any involvement in the attack on Amy Willard, and he refused to say anything at all because he knew that with an attack on a girl ending in death, he could face the death penalty. However, Arthur admitted that that night he was with friends at a birthday party. He didn't say anything more. Then the detectives tracked down Bomar's relatives and talked to them. Arthur's wife said that he knew the blue route on the interstate well. He even sometimes slept in his car on the highway shoulder. During the attack on Amy, June 19, 1996, her husband, according to his wife, was absent for a couple of days, so she didn't know what he was doing during that time. Bomar's stepbrother also shared interesting information. He mentioned that on weekends they constantly went to Smokey Joe's, and Arthur used various ways to approach women. He could spill a drink on them, supposedly by accident, arrange an intentional collision with a car in the parking lot to start a conversation. In addition to his wife, Arthur had a mistress, Mary. The girl didn't know the man was married, and the investigators opened her eyes to that. Naturally, Mary got upset and started telling what Bomar had told her. So Arthur saw Amy at Smokey Joe's bar when she was getting into her car. Since the girl was alone, the man followed her in his Ford. On the blue route, he cut off her car and ordered her to stop, showing a fake police badge. Amy got angry and doubted that Bomar was a real police officer. This infuriated Arthur. In response, the man hit the girl, causing her to lose consciousness. He pulled her out of the car and put her in his vehicle. Then he drove to an abandoned building, assaulted her, and hit her on the head with something heavy. To avoid leaving evidence, Arthur put Amy's clothes in a trash bag and threw it away elsewhere, and dragged the body and left it at the vacant lot. This could have been a breakthrough in the case if the same information hadn't been published in the media earlier. Unfortunately, the offended girl's words meant nothing without supporting evidence. The DNA test results weren't ready yet, so the detectives decided to find the car Arthur Bomar was in on the night of the attack on Amy Willard. From the insurance company records, the investigators learned that the Ford had been in an accident and towed to a junkyard. Experts confirmed that the tire treads matched the wheel prints at the crime scene, but there was no evidence in the form of blood or DNA inside the car. Because it had stood without a roof for several months, everything inside was destroyed by various weather conditions. Moreover, Arthur had worked in a hospital for some time and surely knew how to get rid of bloodstains. The detectives didn't give up and dismantled the car into parts. Once again, more carefully studying the photos and examining the cross-shaped marks on Amy's body, they concluded that at some point, the perpetrator's car drove over the girl's remains and stopped in the area of her chest and abdomen. The thing is, the oil pan of the car had exactly the same pattern as the thermal burns on Amy's body. When the investigators removed one of the door panels, they saw brown drops resembling blood on the metal part. Experts took a sample for analysis and sent it to the lab to determine the DNA profile. All that remained was to wait for the expert results. The expert report provided the necessary evidence to press charges. The blood found in the trunk of the Honda stolen from Maria matched the owner's DNA, and the blood found on the door panel of the old Ford matched Amy Willard's DNA. The DNA extracted from the semen during the girl's autopsy confirmed Arthur Bomar's involvement in her murder. On December 10, 1997, Arthur, already in custody, was charged. However, despite the irrefutable evidence, the man refused to admit his guilt. A month later, he tried to commit suicide in his prison cell using a bedsheet, but the fabric couldn't hold his weight, and in the end, Bomar survived. Arthur faced the death penalty, but Gail Willard, Amy's mom, stated in the media that this man's death wouldn't resurrect her daughter. The woman didn't want Bomar's parents to experience the same pain she did, losing their child. It's worth noting that Gail showed compassion not to the criminal himself, but to his relatives. On the other hand, Amy's father, Paul, said that when the time comes to carry out Arthur's death sentence, he would like to sit in the front row. Bomar's trial was scheduled for September 1998. The trial attracted heightened media attention. The courtroom was filled with spectators. Amy's loved ones sat in the front rows. The family and friends wore specially designed T-shirts with a large sunflower on the chest in memory of the deceased, similar to the one the girl wore on the night of her tragic death. The sunflower became a symbol of Amy's life and hope for justice. Unfortunately, the judge believed that in this way the relatives and friends could influence the jury. So they were asked to remove the sunflower T-shirts, cover them with other clothing, or leave the courtroom altogether. This was very unpleasant because besides the T-shirts, the prosecution had more substantial evidence, such as DNA. But those present had to comply. Some simply turned their clothes inside out, others threw on coats to simply cover the sunflowers. However, this didn't save Arthur Bomar from a guilty verdict and the death penalty. Throughout the trial, the defendant had to be restrained due to frequent outbursts of anger. After the judge read the verdict, Bomar even folded his fingers, imitating a blow, and pointed at Amy's relatives sitting in the front row. Judging by his behavior, this person shouldn't have been released from prison at all. Arthur's relatives also didn't behave in the best way. Many members of his family were very upset by this outcome of the case. They were more concerned about Arthur's life than the fact that a young student had suffered at his hands, and possibly several other people. When the relatives left the courtroom, reporters approached them. Not wanting to communicate with the press, they rudely pushed the correspondents away, and Arthur's mother even tried to hit one of them with her cane. As they say, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Meanwhile, Maria Cabanas was still listed as missing. 3 months after Arthur's sentence, in January 1999, a man walking his dog in a field accidentally stumbled on a human skull. DNA showed that these remains belonged to Maria. The cause of her death was blunt head trauma, just like Amy's. Unfortunately, Arthur Bomar was never charged with the woman's murder. Because he was already on death row, the authorities saw no point in it, although the investigators were sure that Bomar is guilty of the crime. A person has three enemies: the world, consisting of people who often use freedom for evil; the devil, who sometimes comes with faith; and one's own flesh, which, out of boredom and excessive freedom, tends to cause harm and damage to himself or others. Only the person has the choice to let enemies get close or to keep under special control. If you have finished watching, you are a real fan of true crime. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the bell notifications, click the like.